Yeah, Pete, North Las Vegas. Thought I'd do a quick update video. I've kind of moved on to the electrical system, and I started taking a look at my electrical load. Mostly these twin spall fans on a radiator, air conditioning, and a few other modifications that I made. This stock CS130 that puts out about 100 amps wasn't up to the job, and this is brand new. I haven't even run it, but that's what came with my serpentine, my GM performance kit. And like I said, because of the stuff that I've added to the car, this just doesn't put out enough. So I decided to go with this Powermaster alternator, and this part number is a 47461. Puts out 140 amps. It has the side mount for your charging cable, and this is a true one-wire alternator. It doesn't require anything except the battery, and it does not require an L input. Nothing. I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but according to their literature, their directions, this is a true one-wire alternator. Okay, so the other thing about this alternator is, as you're looking at it from the front, this is what's called a left offset. So if you're looking at it from the front, the top mount bolt will be on your left. And then they have what's called a right offset version. And then they have a center mount version. And then down here, they have a different style of mount. They have what's called a saddle mount. And that'll be two tabs that fit over your mount on the alternator, where this is solid in here, and the tabs are on the mounting bracket on my car. And there's other considerations before you select the alternator that you think you need as far as fitment and how it goes. And it took me about an hour and a half to figure out what alternator I needed. I went to Jegs, I went to Summit, I went to Powermaster and took a look at their PDF catalog. And like I said, after about an hour and a half, 2 hours, I finally figured out exactly what part number I needed so that it would bolt right up to the car. Okay, so I said that this is a true one-wire alternator. They do give you an L input output on the back if you need to run a warning light, and you do not need the L input output for this to operate properly as far as charging rate. Like I said, this is a true one-wire. Now on the stock alternator, stock AC Delco, in order for this thing to run right, especially at low RPMs, you need an L input or output, and that L pin is normally what also gives you your warning indicator, your generator light inside. So you can just run a single L through a light bulb. This car used a 194, which is 3.8 watts, which means if I did not want to run the warning light, I would have to substitute a resistor for the light bulb. And the numbers that I came up with for my system and my electrical system, yours may be different. I saw all different kinds of numbers online, but when I crunched the numbers using the wattage rating of the bulb, about 50 ohms in series, if you're not using a warning light, will get this alternator to work correctly when you wire it up to your ignition charge wire, which I think is normally a brown wire. But anyway, we won't get into the actual wiring. I'm just telling you what I learned about this L input output. Now, if you want to run a warning light, that's fine. It'll run just fine with just a warning light, but my recommendation would be to run a resistor in parallel with the warning light, because if the warning light burns out, now you're back to no L or input output. But if you run a resistor in parallel around the light and you pick the correct value, which in my case was somewhere between 500 and 560 ohms in parallel with the light bulb to get this thing to work if the light burned out. So anyway, this one here, what I'm trying to say, the short version is, in order for this alternator to work correctly, you need that L. And whether you simulate it with a resistor, just run it through a light, a resistor in parallel with the light, I mean, whatever your needs are. So anyway, the other thing I wanted to say was these CS130, according to everything I read, they don't like to be spun up more than about 18,000 RPM. So what I had to do is measure my crank pulley down here and measure this pulley down here. And what you do is you take this diameter and divide it into your crank pulley diameter, and then that's going to give you your ratio. In my case, this size pulley here is 2 3/8. My crank was 7 3/4. So when you divide this into 7 3/4, you come up with about 3.26. So now you take that 3.26, which is your ratio and your ratio number, and you multiply it times your engine RPM. So with my pulleys, the way they're set up, I shouldn't go above 5,500 RPM if I want to stay under 18,000. So what I may end up doing is putting a slightly bigger pulley, probably go up to about a 3.5 inch pulley on the alternator. And that should slow things down enough to where I stay well under 18,000 RPM. But I can run the engine up to 5,800, maybe 6,000 RPM. So anyway, I learned more in the last few days about alternators than I never really wanted to know. But these are just some of the considerations that you got to take, you know, when you start swapping alternators around in different amperage ratings. And also because I went to a more amperage on the alternator. In my case, a 6 gauge will be fine for the amperage rating, and I went with the American Auto Wire. That's a 200 amp fuse. I guess they call that a mega fuse. So anyway, yeah, with this thing on here, I don't think I'm going to have any problems. Like I said, my max load calculated with everything on this car running all at the same time was around 100 amps. So this puts out 140. And they actually gave me a little test card. And it says at idle it puts out 107. So there's my max load right there at idle. And then at cruise I'm running around close to 130. And then we get above cruise, we're looking at 160. So it's actually putting out a little bit more than 140 at the high end. They have the charge rate set at 14.8, which is for my my area, Las Vegas. This should get the job done. I mean, if this thing works like advertised. And like I said, I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but a true one wire. You don't need any field, you don't need any excitation, you don't need an L wire, but you can run the L if you want for a warning light. All right, well, hope this helps somebody on their alternator selection. Later, Pete, North Las Vegas.